Hello, everybody. My name is Graham Elwood, and you are watching The Political Vigilante. Very special guest, Dr. Jill Stein, my favorite power broker that can just sway elections, and you just do all this stuff. I always love saying that.
Just like thinking about it.
Yeah, they're the kingmaker. You just, oh man, the Green Party has just had its grip on this country for too long. When are you going to let us be free and just let us enjoy this corporate duopoly that tells us what to think? It's so. So I urge everybody to watch some of the other interviews I've done with Dr. Stein. And, you know, we've talked about this off camera. We've talked about when you came to see Ron and I do the Progressive Comedy Tour in Boston, which was wonderful. And we all kind of, it was so cool having you in the audience. I was like, I know a lot of, I've been in show business a long time, so I don't get starstruck very easily, but I got to be honest with you, I was like, oh, I voted for her. It was a cool moment, man. And then, you know, you've introduced me to Kevin Rocca as an amazing filmmaker, and him and the editor for Revolution Televised. They're working on,
Yes.
I went to Russia and shot a bunch of footage and interview, and they're editing that for me, which is so
Great.
thank you for connecting us progressives. And this is the thing I always ask people who are in our world, being just, we want the truth. We're lefty, anti-war. We recognize the corruption of both parties, and we're done with like, oh, the Democrats are so much better. They're just two different types of evil. As I joked about on stage, it's like you need a babysitter for the kids, and you got to choose between a pedophile and a meth head. You know, like those are our two choices. One of the things I like asking folks such as yourself about is, how do you deal with this on an emotional level? Because we've all lost friends. I mean, I'll say this most recently. I retweeted when you were in that Twitter fight with Neera Tanden, a comedian, honestly, he's like a Second City person, someone I've known for a long time from Chicago. We're not super close, but he's someone I like and think is funny and I think is smart. He writes back, oh, Jill, go back in your hole. You know, you've caused, and I was just like, this guy's a friend of mine who I'm sure he thinks he's some liberal, feminist, woke guy. I'm like, you just told the female doctor to go back into her hole because she's not a warmonger. And, you know, I've had serious, I used to do a movie podcast. I just ended it, and we'd talk movies, and comedic friends I've known for years, we'd have big arguments about politics, and they all say this, you know, you helped Trump win, and Russia. And I'm always like, did Russia create superdelegates? Did Russia prevent Hillary? I always joke, like, did you and Putin and Burn Bros lock arm in arm to prevent the Hillary motorcade from campaigning in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania? She ran a horrible campaign. The Podesta emails, and I feel like sometimes I'm going crazy. So I want to talk to you. You've been this activist for a long time, and the Green Party is always getting blamed. How do you deal with that emotionally? Like, have you lost friends, or you fight with? I mean, like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, definitely. You know, yes, you know, my whole social group changed when I became political. So I had been like a doctor activist, and I was active. You know, I would fight a lot of environmental battles and work with communities that were struggling against, you know, polluting incinerators and coal plants and toxic waste sites and stuff like that. And you know, I really got grounded in the work. And as long as that's all I was doing, you know, my doctor group was just fine with it. You know, and then when I got asked to run for office as a Green, I wasn't a political person, and I had not, you know, because to me, the parties were always corrupt. I mean, I grew up in the civil rights era and, you know, in the era of protests and shutting down our campuses and having alternative colleges. And, I was very much a part of that movement. And I did not have any affinity for the political establishment, and not the Democrats either. I grew up during the Vietnam War, and so, the Democrats were all about that, So I never had an affinity with established political parties. And so then when I got asked to run for office...
What year was this?
This was in 2000.
Okay.
I was recruited to run for governor in Massachusetts, and at the time it looked like we were going to have clean elections funding. We had passed a bill to create public financing. And it was a great bill that was passed by referendum. The elected officials would not pass it. We had to pass it as a voter referendum. We passed it by a huge margin. And then in the progressive Democratic state of Massachusetts, the Democrats destroyed the bill and they repealed it on a voice vote, after we the people had passed it. And that was, for me, that was the final straw. That was when I realized I'm never going to have anything to do with the Democratic Party, because here we got to the root of the evils and they threw it out. They threw out what would have been the fix for that. So I thought, this is the seat of the progressive Democrats of the nation here in this state, and this is as good as they get. Forget it, So I said, yeah, I'll be a Green, And so at any rate, that was a big shock to my activist community that I was going to run for office as a Green. And I lost a lot of friends then. Well, but, now as I look back at it, they weren't friends, you know. They weren't friends, and I kind of, nowadays, I just mostly feel sorry for people who are trapped, who are in this two-party trap. And they are, it's hard being scapegoated and being blamed for stuff and being the target of...
How do you do that? I mean, I've taken some stuff online, but it is nothing, man. It is like a kitten hissing at me compared to what they have said and done and are doing currently. We just talked about how Nira is still they're still blaming you for Trump. How do you deal with that? I mean...
Well, I always knew, that if you challenge power, you're going to be vilified for it. You're going to be crucified for it. And I knew that when I went into this, that it was going to be, really rough, and I would get very beat up. And the only reason I did it was because I feel like if we don't push the system, it's over. It's over, and it's going to be over soon. And as I'm my area in medicine is environmental health, really, and toxics and exposure and neurodevelopment and neurodegeneration. And, I'm just immersed in, that's what drove me to become political, because I really saw that I got really tired of documenting our demise. I felt like I was a coroner, and I was just studying how we are being destroyed as a species, not by ourselves, but by oligarchy that uses the planet and the people, and it's a power problem. It's a democracy problem. And I realized that I would basically know, I felt like I had great privilege in all kinds of ways, to get this education and to be a doctor, and then to be able to decide what I wanted to do, because I didn't have to keep working that gig.
Right.
I could do something else. I was 50 by that time, and I could do something else. And I realized that I would just be throwing in the towel on what I knew. And I knew enough about, we started writing these, do I have it right here? I probably do. Somewhere I have these things. But I was part of Physicians for Social Responsibility. And we would write this stuff to try to educate everyday people so they could learn how, what pregnant women shouldn't eat so as not to harm your baby. And at the time, people didn't know about mercury, and they didn't know about dioxin and PCBs and stuff like that, and how you get exposed to it. And so I knew, because I studied this stuff, I knew how to protect myself and how to protect my family, and felt like that's outrageous that you have to go to medical school and then study toxicology for a couple of years to figure out how to protect your family.
Right.
That's not okay. So for a while, I was like helping to write these kind of public education things for health providers and teachers and other people who were just concerned about community health. And that's what I did for a while. But then I began to feel like all I'm doing here is documenting how we're going down. We're just like, we're trying to protect people, but you really can't protect people, really, except by preventing this stuff. You have to prevent it. And we need much better regulation. We need to regulate based on the precautionary principle. And, you can't protect people unless you're also protecting the air and the water and our food supply and providing a good food supply, and people need jobs and all that stuff, And I just realized, left to its own devices, we weren't going to last very long, and then the climate stuff became public around 2008. That's when kind of the understanding of climate really hit hard. And by that time, I had already decided, no, I wasn't going to be a medical doctor. I was going to be a political doctor, and work in political medicine instead of clinical medicine. Political medicine dealing with the mother of all illnesses, our sick political system that makes it impossible to actually fix the things that are literally killing us, whether it's our horrible healthcare system, that leaves like about half of Americans unable to afford their health care. I mean, either they don't have health insurance or they can't afford to use it. So we're about half of effectively, or the air and the water issues and the food issues and all the rest. We have so much self-inflicted disease. It's incredible. And our survival is declining. We are like the only developed nation whose survival is actually decreasing, and this is for several years now. And chronic diseases are climbing their way down the age spectrum and coming, young kids now have a whole host of problems, from diabetes to high blood pressure. And, the things you used to get when you were 60, you now get in your teens.
Right.
So it's not looking good on all kinds of ways. It's not looking good. And add to that the climate and other stuff. And I just realized that this is the Hail Mary moment. We really got to go all in now. We really have to go all in on fixing this. And that there's no point in hanging back, because that's what we really need to be afraid of. What we need to be afraid of is inaction, and allowing this, catastrophe to just roll forward in the way that it is right now.
Is that then what in 2012, you, correct me if I'm wrong, ran as the Green nominee for president? You ran in 12 and 16, and in 2012 you wanted to be on stage during the debates and were locked up, like you were chained to a chair or something. I've heard you describe this before, but if you could explain to our audience, just to give people some context and some actual tactics that, Obama, who I voted for, I thought he was going to be like this FDR, and there was going to be this sweeping hope and change, and he was going to do all this stuff. But, I should have known when during the campaign he would talk about green energy, and then somewhere in the middle of his campaign, I heard him say clean coal. And I was like, I'm sorry, say that again? Clean coal? That is a scam. That's like ethical child pornographer. It does not exist. So walk us through, obviously you've given us the reasons why you decided to go on this track, and walk us through the 2012 incident and then the fallout from that, from not just the media and social media and stuff, but like friends and family after doing that.
Yeah. So let me just clarify one thing, which is that the reason this stuff doesn't get to me, for the most part, it doesn't really doesn't get to me. It's because, to my mind, the alternative is, it's climate chaos in the next 10 years, or maybe it's 20 years. But, I'm forever visioning, I just walk around with an apocalyptic vision of things, and I'm seeing what it looks like 15 years from now, and, fill in the blanks here,
right.
But nuclear power plants are going off because the sea level, is rising. And we're having Fukushimas all over the place, and we don't have energy.
And
There's no
Fukushima
energy.
just released a bunch of radioactive water into the ocean. And so it's just,
Yeah,
I'm a surfer. So I'm just like, oh, great. And this is going to, if the oceans die, we're done. But
right. And we are at the brink, on virtually all systems right now. Whether you're looking at oceans or or climate or drought. Climate migrations, the total and utter breakdown of social systems, this can be fixed, and it can be fixed like now. And all we got to do is build, we can plant 1 trillion trees for $300 billion, and immediately we bring down half of the CO2. So there are all kinds of immediately available, affordable solutions that also create a better society and create, justice. And, so this is totally doable. This is a democracy problem. This is nothing but a democracy problem. So, I don't worry about getting smeared, and I have my ferocious, security dog here.
yeah, we met your vicious attack dog in the last interview. That's good. You feel that that's fantastic.
If you met her in person, you really would understand she is a security dog. She actually is a security dog. I have to be very careful about who I allow her to, encounter. Yeah, no, but beyond that, I really don't worry about being smeared. I worry about, are we going to get this together in the next 3 years? My worries are about how do we eke out a path to survive, and to thrive. And they're both absolutely doable. That's what I worry about. I was an activist for so long before I became a candidate, that's my frame of mind. My frame of mind is, it's the environmental crisis we're facing and the health crisis we're facing. And that's what I worry about. And that's what I spend my time worrying about. And compared to that, which is the alternative, if I were to protect myself and encourage other people to protect yourself from being smeared, then we're just running headlong into absolute catastrophe, and there's no stopping it. Mm-hmm. So, I'd say if you're going to be afraid of the right things. Be afraid of climate crisis. Be afraid of, of the migrant crisis. Be afraid of unbridled militarism. That's what we need to be afraid of, and we need to mobilize against that. And we need to know how powerful and strong we are. Most people agree with us, especially when they have a chance to have a conversation and understand what their options are. Most people agree with us. So the notion that media creates, that the corporate media creates, that we are the lunatic fringe. And I'll tell you, this came home to me in my first political campaign, where I was running for governor, and there was no way that I was going to be allowed into the televised debates, but people were not happy with the Democrat and Republican debates, and we had huge demonstrations, and we finally forced the TV, the corporate TV, to organize an open debate. So they did, and it was in a studio with no live audience, and I, laid it out, the agenda, which is very much what it is right now for Greens. That is, green energy, cutting the military in half, good public education, et cetera, Medicare for all, although we called it single payer at the time, but it was basically that agenda. And during the debate, all that stuff went over like a lead balloon. Like nobody even wanted to debate it. It was like considered so lunatic. But when we walked out of the debate, I was mobbed by the press who told me I had won on the instant online viewer poll. Who knew? Nobody knew there was an instant online viewer poll going on. And, and like suddenly it was like, oh my God. So this has just been a scam, this pretense that these ideas, these progressive ideas represent the lunatic fringe. They're not the lunatic fringe. They are the absolute heart and soul of a human agenda that everyday people are really hungry for. Mm-hmm. And so it's within our reach, our survival is within our reach, and a world that works for all of us is in our reach.
So then, yeah, I agree with all that. And they've done they make us the lunatic fringe. It's like, no, we're the majority. It's the 1%ers. They're the lunatic fringe. They just happen to control all the money and the banks and everything. They literally, and the banks they want war because you get debt out of war. They want all of this stuff. That's why all this Russia and the impeachment is because the peak of global defense spending was in the early 80s during the height of the Cold War. So we need another one. So we need another one, even though, like you say, we outspend what? It used to be the top 7. Now I think it's the top 10 countries combined. Like we just keep, and the Democratic Party, who says, oh, we hate Trump, and they just give blank check, man. Liz Warren, Booker, all of them. Just, there's more money for war, dude. There you go. Take it. So, especially since, I think that's fantastic that you're just like, the consequences of not doing something are way more scary than just people calling you a Kremlin puppet or whatever online.
Yeah.
And it's like you say, like, you've lost friends, but maybe they weren't real friends to begin with. And I've had to kind of deal with that. Like, well, maybe this was just a comedian I had worked with. I wasn't as close to them as I thought, or I don't know. I thought they were smarter, but they don't want to listen to reason. I don't know. Right.
And, you develop a new circle of friends. And, for me, that's what the Green Party is. It's like a big extended, circle of friends. And people who get there, you don't fall into the Green Party because it's convenient, you pay if you're a Green, and it's a really, not that it doesn't, it has its share of, sure. Every group does, of course, but I just know whenever I did a lot of traveling, during my 2 campaigns, and I would just have all these homestays set up for me all over the place, people I didn't know, but I just loved them all. It's like they were just so like right on and had such open hearts and minds, and really were very anchored in the value system that I share, which I think it's the only value system that we're going to be able to live with as a planet. We're just way too interconnected right now in all kinds of ways, and we need to, we need to have a whole new value system that really values people over things. Our motto is people, planet, and peace over profit, and it needs to be all of that. And Greens really share that, and that's where the future of the planet lies. That's the only way we're going to get along and make this work. And it's going to take a lot of getting along, to make it work.
And I think too that like you bring up a great point. I always talk about, I think even like the libertarians, I love just talking politics with them, even debating. Because I say the libertarian is more open to hearing a lefty progressive message than an entrenched Democrat, because the libertarian is somebody who, like similar to the Greens, they made a choice to go to this other party. They weren't just like, well, my parents were libertarians. Nobody says that. Nobody's ever said that. And so they at least acknowledge, a lot of us agree, because it's like, well, they acknowledge the system's broken. They acknowledge there's a problem with the 2-party system. Their solutions and our solutions are very different, but they're more willing to hear. And when you bring them the stats and the statistics, they don't just sit there and go, oh, Russia, shut up, crash. I say this all the time, that the corporate Democrats, the Neera of the world, and the people that only listen to her or watch Rachel Maddow or CNN or whatever, I go, Howard, explain to me how they're different than the Trump supporter who says he never lies. They're both crazy. And it's like, it's in that team mentality, which is designed by the ruling class or the empire, whatever you want to call them. That is by design. They're using the same, my candidate's always right, your candidate's, it's like sports teams, you know, Red Sox, Yankees, that's it. No, if my,
Well,
yeah.
let me just throw in one thing, which, you know, in my experience, it's mostly people of privilege who are being served right now by the political power as we know it. It's people of privilege, you know, in the upper 5 or 10% who are doing well. And you get below that and people are really insecure. And then, you know, it's like 44% of Americans are living on $18,000 salary. 18,000. 44%, you know, I mean, this is like mind-boggling. So in my experience, you know, I don't go out of my way to be in privileged environments because, you know, in the words of, who was it, the famous author, Upton Sinclair, was it? Or, yeah, I think it was Upton Sinclair, who said, you can't teach a man to like stop doing something when his income depends on it, you know, so that we're kind of creatures of our, the hand that feeds us. And people who are being fed and who are doing okay in this current environment, they're going to defend it. You know, they just are. But if you just step outside of that a little bit and start talking to people who are under 25, you know, who are locked out of the job market, or people of color who are locked out of the job market and housing and education, it's really different. I mean, there are a lot of people who get talked into being servants of the system, but plenty aren't. Plenty aren't. And, you know, I think if you're living in Hollywood, you're having to take a lot of shit for living there. You know, and I think that's true for anybody who's living in, you know, in the wealthy enclaves. You're just going to get a lot of shit.
Yeah, and I try to point out to people, I go, tell me how great this system is. Just in Los Angeles, you can't drive more than a mile in Los Angeles without seeing two very distinct things. A big high-rise with new luxury apartments or condos and a tent city. They are right next to each other. I mean, I live in Santa Monica, California, and thankfully I'm in a rent-controlled apartment. There's a new luxury building going on right by the 10 freeway, and there are literally people living in tents. And I'm just like, when is this? But you bring up a great point. There is, if you're comfortable, hey, it's not my problem, we should do something about it, but it's over there, it's over there. And then there's all these people who are the working poor, who are driving for Uber or Lyft or Grubhub, and they got 3 jobs, and they have no health care, they have no retirement, they have no nothing. And then this is one, I think you see how by design it is to a certain extent, because like in France, they have government health care. So if you get your health care from your job, you are less likely to protest that job or go on strike or go to a protest during the week, because if you lose the job, you lose the health care. Whereas people in France aren't worried about losing their health care, so they're going to protest, and they've made change.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd say, you know, if you are finding it really hard to, you know, to have a reasonable conversation with people, you know, try talking to different kinds of people, you know, and you know, don't talk to somebody who's quite so comfortable as they are, because they're going to be very resistant to change and very defensive about a critique of the system that's feeding them. Is that way. You know, I mean, to me, this is organizing 101, that you really have to go, you know, you don't want to talk to people who are just never going to agree with you. And I realized that when I kept trying to persuade my old friends, you know, why it was good. And I realized I was talking to them for years and they weren't moving. I needed to start talking to different people. And then, you know, I started talking to more, you know, people who weren't professionals and who weren't educated. And that's where the change is, totally. And those are my friends now. And there's plenty of them out there. There's like gobs of them.
That's such a great point, because again, I've been talking to a lot of my friends in Hollywood, and they're comfortable. They have nice Hollywood show business lives. They don't need $15 an hour because they've got a writers guild or a SAG after. These are the show business unions, and if you make a certain amount of money, you get health insurance. So they don't need $15 an hour. They don't need Medicare for all. They don't need student debt forgiveness. They already have it. And when I talk to, I learned, one of the things that opened it up for me was I did 7 comedy tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Kuwait. And I'm talking to people, and I went 04, 06, 07, 08, 2011, and 2012. And in the 7 and 8 and 11 ones, I heard a lot of, this is my 28-year-old, this is my 2nd or 3rd deployment. I say, why are you here? And I didn't hear a lot of like, Truth, Justice, American Way, they were like, I got a $20,000 reenlistment bonus. The only jobs back in fill in the blank town were Walmart. The mill was closed, the this was closed, the that was closed. It was fast food, Walmart, or the Army. And you start talking to those people, and I can see this from doing the live Jimmy Dore shows and from doing the Progressive Comedy Tour. People say, who comes to your shows? And I say, anyone. I've been a stand-up comic for 30 years. I've done 300 episodes of television. I came up in the traditional, go to Hollywood, show, audition, do shows, get on TV. That was my goal. I was not going to be a political pundit like this. That wasn't going to be my thing, or a political comedian. I didn't think it was going to happen. And what I'm seeing, and I've never had the diversity. I mean, Ron Placone and I were in Iowa City. Iowa, pretty white state, right? And it's not a criticism, that's just the demographic of that state. And Bernie gave a speech that day on campus, and then we invited the Bernie people to come, because we invite groups. We've invited Green Party, we've invited the DSA to come to our shows, so it's more than just a stand-up night, it's a get involved, be an activist. And the Bernie delegate, they were just these people of every different ethnic, we've had, I say from teenagers to people in their 80s, everyone in between. I've had vets, I've had doctors, I've had working class people, I've had judges, I've had single parents, I've had, everybody. And they're all like, and the thing that's beautiful about when you come to our shows, and when you do, it hurts a little bit, and you've probably been dealing with it longer, so you have a little more immunity to it than me, of like, well, this person, they just won't move anymore. But I moved to this new group, and people just come up and they're like, oh my God. It's like when I met you in person, it was just like, we both knew each other from watching, and it was like, there's just this automatic like, okay, yes, yes. And the fans get it, and they always bring someone. They're like a diehard Jimmy Dore fan, or a diehard fan of me, or whatever, and they brought this friend who they've been trying to get to wise up, and they see the comedy show, and they go, yeah, I kind of get where you're coming. And that's the beauty, that's the thing to focus on as we move forward, is that like when you find these new groups of people who are open to it, that's what's exciting, and that's when I get hopeful, at least, and it sounds like you as well, of like, oh, there is a possibility to turn the tides here, of getting these groups, let's talk to the 100 million people that don't vote because they don't feel like it matters. Let's get them involved, and we need a candidate and policies and platforms to do that.
Totally. Yeah. Exactly. And I think I think people are in a totally different space right now. It's like, it's hard to describe what condition we're in, because suddenly we have this hyper awareness that we have a terminal disease, and we may all go down together, maybe 20 years or what, who knows, but it's like we're all looking mortality in the face right now, and maybe we'll get out of it and things will be great, but we can only do that together. So, I personally just feel like there's this whole new sense, which grows out of crisis, and crisis is reality. That's just part of life. We've sort of lived under this illusion of being protected from it in a lot of ways. But, crisis is a very real thing. and loss is a very real thing. And we're now just living with this sense of incredible jaw-dropping anticipated loss. Species are dying every day, by the hundreds. Extinctions are all around us. And, it's like there's just this whole new backdrop, and it's very emotionally wrenching. But that said, it just kind of opens people up to whole new conversations, because we have to make this work. We are on a ship. That ship is taking on water right now, really fast. And we need to be able to work together to fix the ship, and then to turn the ship around and go in a totally different direction. But I find myself in conversations with people now that I never thought I could have meaningful conversations with. And, I think these are like really difficult times, but there's enormous potential. And, I'm really disappointed that that Jeremy Corbyn didn't win. But on the other hand, he didn't win for very understandable reasons. And I find just that image of empire doubling down,
right,
because it's teetering at the brink. It knows its days are numbered. So we just got to do the work and really be a community helping each other do that work and see what the, what the vision is and where we're going. And we can get there.
I love it. I think you're correct. I think it is scary, and it is like it could literally the human race could be wiped out in 10, 20 years or less. But also when it is this amazing opportunity to fix everything. Like when I think about like a real Green New Deal, I go, the solution, the Green New Deal has so many solutions in there that we have, that like, it helps inequality, it helps discrimination, it gets rid of the private prisons. There's all these things we can do. So I do share your optimism, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. So is there a website or whatever where people could follow what you're doing or get in contact with you? Or
yeah, I'd say the best place is Twitter. So it's just Dr. Jill Stein, DR, no period. That's probably the best place for now. Yeah, so let's just get that team going, and let's make it happen.
I love it. That's what I say to everybody. I go, get involved. And one of the reasons the Progressive Comedy Tour, I always say, you'll show up alone, but you'll leave a part of a community, and get involved. Yeah. It starts on the local level. It starts on the grassroots level. It's supporting candidates like the woman that's running in Maine. Tell us her name.
Lisa Savage, running for U.S. Senate in a ranked choice vote race where she could actually break through and really, talk about transforming things. To get a Green into the Senate would just be astounding.
That's huge.
And it could
a Green in the Senate. Amazon just tried to block the re-election of a socialist in Seattle, and the socialist won. So like there's all these little victories that we have to jump involved in. It's involving electoral politics, and it doesn't have to be either or, as you discussed. It's electoral and activism. So I tell everybody, watch the show, who watches the show, get involved, vote with your dollars, and every little action helps. And you're not alone. You're a part of a global community and a national community of activists and people who care. That's why you're watching this show. That's why you're not watching MSNBC or Fox or CNN or whatever. So, Jill, I really appreciate you taking your time today to talk with us.
Likewise, Graham, and I look forward to the next time.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, like, share, subscribe, push these videos out on your social media. I don't get money from Shell Oil and Coke and Ford and all those folks. So if you can go to patreon.com/Graham to support what I'm doing, or rockfin.com/Graham Elwood. All my tour dates. Ron Placone and I have a big slate of shows for the Progressive Comedy Tour in 2020. We will be coming back to Boston, where I hope Jill, that you can be there. It was great to meet you in person. So all my tour dates, my social media, everything are at GrahamElwood.com. Thank you so much for watching.